Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Veeam Ransomware Prevent, Detect, and Restore product demo. I'm Ioana Bistricianu. I am an Inside Systems Engineer covering Spain, and I will be your host for today, and I'm really glad to meet you. Now, before I dive into a little bit of housekeeping, I would like to make sure that you can hear me and that you can see my screen. You have a panel where you can raise your hand, so it would help me a great deal if you could please press the raise hand button just so that I can make sure you can hear me and that you can see this presentation. All right, I see a couple of raised hands. Thank you very much for the confirmation. Now let's dive into the housekeeping. As you might have already noticed, all mics are muted to avoid any background noise, any overlapping conversations, but we are here to answer any and all questions that might come up throughout this webinar. To try and make the session run as smooth as possible, I'm going to ask you please use the Q&A panel or the chat panel to write your questions and comments. I will finish the presentation and demo part in 45 to 50 minutes. And I will dedicate some time at the end to address any questions or comments. Now, one additional thing before I dive right in, the webinar is being recorded. Once we're finished, our marketing team will send you an email. They will thank you for your participation, and they'll send you a link to rewatch the webinar if you wish to do so. And now that we're done with all the housekeeping, let's talk about how you can leverage Veeam to help you fight the good fight against ransomware. And I'm going to start off with some statistics. Ransomware seems to be one, if not the most impactful type of malware in the wild at this moment. You don't have to take my word for it, but take a quick look at the results that appear on your screens. They have been extracted from the Veeam Data Protection Trends report that we released last year, and you can go ahead and access ve.am/DPR22 to grab a copy. But before you do that, let's talk about the answers to the question for a quick minute. If you look closely at the graph, you will see that just 24% of our respondents report never being subject to a ransomware attack. The rest, and that is over 70%, suffered at least one just in the past 12 months. This makes me say that if I were in IT security or in incident management, I wouldn't like my odds very much. Do you like yours? Now, over the last 10 years, the security industry has realized modern ransomware protection requires a layered security defense. The initial attack vector has not changed. Over 80% of email on the internet is still spam. What has changed is that we've all started to accept that some attacks might get through, and we've started to plan accordingly. Fact of the matter is, attackers have to make a small investment. They have an unlimited amount of time to attack you, and they only need to be successful once to turn a profit. On the other hand, defenders have to be 100% accurate 100% of the time in order to avoid a costly breach. And the truth is that this is not realistically possible. This has brought security teams to invest in incident response tools, in various services to react faster once they detect a breach. But what all malware fighting, if you will, strategies have in common is that they include the restoration of data from a reliable backup as part of making sure that the attack has been neutralized. And the reason behind this is that containing the breach And verifying that there's no data loss means there's no need to pay the ransom and eventually hope that you will get to recover some of your data. Why am I telling you all this? Because your backup system is one of the defense layers you can leverage in the fight against ransomware. A verifiable and immutable backup increases your security posture and allows you to build resilience if or when all your other defenses fail. We've got access control, we've got security solution, we've got malware detection and response tools. With all these layers in place, how is it that ransomware still gets through? It's the oldest story in the book. It's a numbers game. Malware is being created and it's evolving faster than it can be detected. Anti-malware vendors see up to 1 million new malicious items any given day. And even if it would be possible for them to sign and catch 99% of these threats, they would still be missing about 10,000 threats a day. On the other hand, we've seen many companies that don't address security comprehensively, or they're sometimes forced to build holes in their defenses to meet business requirements, or they have very, very complex network that have vulnerabilities built into their fabric. In a nutshell, the 7 cogwheels you see turning on your screens can be considered the main reasons why attacks have been successful. And let's dive a little bit deeper into them. And I will start with what else but untested backups. If you don't test your backups, you might find yourself with inaccessible data when you need it the most. The lack of testing will also make restoration too slow for companies to financially tolerate, which drives companies to pay the ransom and then hope they will get at least a little bit, a portion of their data back. Then we've got alert fatigue. And this is a concept that started to gain traction back in 2013 when Target was breached. What happened then was that the security tools Target had in place detected the attack. They did send notifications to the security team, but they were flooded with alerts, so they ended up missing exactly the important ones. Next on the list, we've got poor password policies, and I am referring to the use of admin accounts for day-to-day tasks, or the use of simple passwords, or the use of the same password for multiple applications, or not changing your passwords regularly. And a special note here that the lack of a multi-factor authentication solution can also become an issue. Next, there's in some company a lack of network segmentation. Flat networks are very, very easy to manage. That's true. But what is also true is that they come with a drawback. They allow malware to spread very easily. It's true that some networks are so complex that true segmentation is impossible, but the all or nothing approach is putting companies at risk. Next on this list right here, an inconsistent policy between the on-prem data center and the cloud. Migrating to the cloud is very easy, and it can sometimes be done without involving IT. But this in turn leads to vulnerabilities from a security standpoint. And in some cases, we've seen that companies apply the same policies from their data center to cloud operations. That just might not work. And last on my slide right here, but for sure not the least important, we've got misconfigurations. And what I'm referring here are routers and security devices that are left with the default passwords and configurations, which can cause breaches in networks. The fact of the matter is, ransomware is a disaster, and recovering from it involves a myriad of professionals in an organization. You've got senior leadership, legal, HR, PR, marketing, incident response, and the backup team. And there's another thing: the risk of a fire, a flood, earthquake, or any other type of natural disaster is easy to accept and even easier to write off as impossible. But the threat of ransomware has become much more tangible. Now, any company out there has, or they have thought about, a business continuity disaster recovery plan. And every IT department takes a lot of precautions against a breach in their defense layers. What Veeam can do for you is coming to your aid with the tools you need in order to build a robust data protection strategy. With Veeam, your data is safe, but it's also available when you need it. And what we propose is a three-part approach through a software-driven platform. First, protect your data with immutable backups. Second, detect, monitor, and alert for added visibility to your existing defense layers to make sure that the data you restore will not reintroduce a threat in your infrastructure. And third, test and verify your backups for rapid, reliable recovery, because paying your ransom should never be more reliable than your actual backups. Veeam is built around three principles: simplicity, flexibility, and reliability, all of them creating a powerful solution. Veeam is software only, and we're storage agnostic, giving you the flexibility to be in control of storage and configurations, which in turn allow you to fit the backup into your existing environment without needing to re-architect the infrastructure around the backup solution. You can scale Veeam to meet your needs, and you don't have to maintain multiple storage platforms.
So I seem to have received some reports that you were not able to hear me. I hope that you can hear me now, that technology has this one number on me today. So I was telling you about the, can you hear me now? All right, so I have changed my connection. I have changed the audio input, and if you could now tell me if it's better or not. All right, great. Thank you very, very much for the confirmation. So before technology decided to play a number on me, I was telling you that part one of the three-part approach in safeguarding your backups against ransomware is protection through immutable backups. Veeam offers you the flexibility in leveraging your existing storage to create your own hardened repositories for end-to-end protection of your backup data. At the beginning of the presentation, I talked a little bit about how bad actors are constantly evolving their malware to do as much damage as possible. Newer versions of ransomware also have started to target the backup layer. So a part of your data protection strategy should account for resilience. And to help you build this resilience, we recommend the 3-2-1 approach, a story that is as old as backups. 3 copies of data, one of which might be the production environment, stored on 2 different types of media, one of which is offsite. Now, Veeam comes and adds another 1 and a 0 to the 3-2-1 rule. One of the offsite copies should be air-gapped, offline, or immutable, and with 0 errors. The 0 errors on my slide here refers to automated backup testing and recoverability verification. And we will see in the demo part, sorry about that. And we will see in the demo part how you can automate this verification process with Veeam backup and replication. Now, this is not a product pitch, but I just want to make a note here and say that Veeam pioneered automated backup verification. You can never have enough visibility into your network. And our goal is to have every backup job run successfully on the first try. And to that end, we provide assurances your backup jobs are running as expected. And if there is an issue, you can be notified immediately. Now, this seems obvious, but the truth is, it's amazing how many backup job failures are discovered actually in the middle of an attack. Now, specific to ransomware, Veeam can generate alerts that indicate an attack, and it can help your response teams narrow down the scope of the infection. And we will see during the demo part how you can leverage Veeam 1 to get a possible ransomware activity alarm, a suspicious incremental backup size alarm, and how you can use other monitoring features to find unprotected virtual machines, for example, to monitor network performance, or even to build alarms based on specific metrics. I mentioned before that the worst time to realize your backups failed is during a crisis. Sadly, a crisis also seems to be the time when most of the teams realize that there are holes in their recovery plan. Veeam gives you the ability to create and maintain a comprehensive recovery plan and stress test the plan to give you and your leadership confidence. With Veeam, you get automated testing of recovery for every workload. You get the ability to stage workloads prior to recovery to make sure the data is clean and that everything works as expected. And the net result is reduced risk with disaster recovery for all applications, maximized availability, easy patch testing, and you also get to prove compliance with certain requirements. You save time because we automate documentation for you. You get no-touch scheduled DR tests, and you get a verification of applications. And you get to restore confidence. You prove you're prepared against a disaster. You avoid RPO and RTO violations, and you get a proven one-click recovery. Now, of course, everything that I've told you up until now can become useless really quickly if you don't have access to your data centers and or servers. And the truth is, many people are surprised that during a ransomware attack, law enforcement can seize an entire data center as evidence. Veeam's unique approach to data mobility assists organizations of all sizes with their data management tasks. We provide portability, protection, and restoration of workloads across any cloud or platform, including intuitive guidance on how to best store and archive protected data using the scale options that public cloud provides. The portability of your workloads across AWS and Azure means no change in format and the ability to migrate and simply restore to any cloud targets while maintaining continuity. This means that you will be able to get back to normal operations even while the ransomware investigation is happening. Now, beyond the resilience, you can use cloud targets to reduce your storage costs through automated tiered storage, moving older backup files to lower cost cloud targets while you're still ensuring easy access if needed. Best of all, we support AWS, Azure, IBM Cloud, Google Cloud, and S3 compatibles, which means we provide you with flexibility. And it also means that there is no vendor lock-in. You can store data in the cloud without the need to purchase extra products or pay any unexpected cloud tax. One format lowers barriers for data migration. A single management experience across all environments lowers overall management costs. And you also get the option to archive data intelligently to maximize storage investment. So your data is protected. You have the ability to recover your data to a different location, and you know your data is free of malware. It's restore time. Veeam's flexibility means that there are 91 ways to recover your data. You might need only 2 or 3, but isn't it great that you get so many options? It's kind of like built-in future proofing, if you will. The key takeaway here is the speed with which we can restore data. And in many cases, we've had customers tell us that they've reduced the restore time from days to mere hours. Now, in the case of ransomware, some companies have chosen to pay the ransom because the recovery process with another backup solution was too slow or too cumbersome. What we aim to do is change that equation and make the restore process not just the right choice morally, but the right financial choice for the business. This is why we have taken a holistic approach to the ransomware problem. It's not just one product or one feature, but a full solution that combines best-in-class technology with expertise throughout your data protection journey to ensure that you have flexibility in design for lower operational costs and better TCO, visibility with detection, monitoring, and alerting, data mobility to get back to operations during the investigation, and rapid, reliable recovery, which is more cost effective than paying for the ransom. And now that the slide section is done, let me just quickly change my screens here and dive into what I call the fun part. The fun part being, of course, the demo. And meanwhile, before I change the screens here, I encourage you to use the chat or the Q&A panel to ask any and all of your questions. I will be more than happy to answer them. And folks, bear with me for just a few more moments here while I bring everything up. All right, and we should be good to go now. Let's see what am I sharing? Yeah, I'm sharing. All right, I'm sharing the correct screen. Okay. And up until now, I have told you a very nice story about how Veeam can help you protect your organization's data against ransomware. But now let's take a look at how you can implement the 3-part approach in your Veeam infrastructure using Veeam backup and replication. So let's get on to the fun part. Part 1 is immutability for your backups. And you can do that in your local infrastructure, in your data center, with a general purpose Linux server with the XFS file system. Now, this file system, aside from allowing us to leverage immutability for the backup files, will also help you reduce storage consumption, which allows for a full backup file to consume the same amount of space as an incremental one. To enable immutability, you just tick this box and you decide on an immutability period. Now, this means that for the number of days you define here, your backup files cannot be modified or deleted, not even by Veeam or by a root user. The Linux server, the XFS that I was telling you about, can also aid in hardening your security posture because we employ single-use credentials. I'm talking about credentials that we only use once during the deployment while we're adding the Linux server to the backup infrastructure. These credentials are not stored on the backup server or in the infrastructure, so backup files will be safe even if the Veeam backup and replication server is compromised. Okay, so this takes care of the immutability in your local data center, but we also offer immutability in AWS S3 and other S3 compatible cloud providers. Now, to aid you in leveraging cloud storage with the current version that we have in the market, which is V11, we employ a scale-out backup repository, which is a setting in Veeam backup and replication that pulls together all your existing local storage that you can extend with a cloud storage provider, whether it's an AWS S3, an S3 compatible, Azure Blob, Google Cloud, IBM Cloud. Now remember that for S3 and S3 compatible in V11, this is where you define immutability. The reason why we support immutability in AWS S3 and S3 compatible is the fact that we rely on object lock to configure this particular setting. So as I was mentioning, by ticking this box right here and deciding on an immutability period, this is where you define immutability. Now, to add a scale-out backup repository, you just go here to scale out repositories and hit add. There are two options of how soon after the backup files are created, how soon you will get to move them to your cloud of choice. You can either decide to copy them to object storage as soon as they're created to comply with the 32110 rule, or you can decide to move them as they age out of the operational restore window. This is closely tied to the retention that you define at a job level. Or you can have both of them ticked, as you can see here in my example. Okay, so we've covered part one, which is immutability. Let's cover part two, and that is setting up alerts. And how do you set up those alerts? Well, you leverage Veeam 1. Veeam 1, which is our powerful monitoring tool. It helps you monitor your infrastructure, whether it's your virtual infrastructure running on Hyper-V or VMware, or whether it is your backup infrastructure running Veeam backup and replication. It gives you a lot of useful information. Such as host status, data store status, which of your virtual machines are healthy, which ones are displaying warnings, and which ones are displaying errors. You get to look at what the top hosts in your infrastructure are and which ones of them have the lowest load. When you dive a little bit deeper, you get to see, for example, at a host level, what is the network consumption, what are the top virtual machines that are running on a specific host by CPU, memory, data store, network usage, and so on and so forth. Aside from the infrastructure view, which gives you a logical view in terms of how the hosts and clusters are organized, you also get a business view where you can define certain tags that Veeam 1 will leverage in order to be able to display the virtual machines. It would be as simple as your financial or accounting team making a request and asking how they are doing in terms of resources. Then you could pull a report and say, well, the virtualization resources allocated to your department are these ones, and this is what your usage pattern looks like, which is pretty cool. In terms of what Veeam 1 can do for the Veeam backup and replication infrastructure, for example, if I'm looking at my immutable XFS repository, my Linux hardened repository, I can see what repository type this one is, how long I have set the immutability period for, and I can do a little bit of capacity planning, and that Veeam 1 is able to tell me how much free space I have and when estimatedly I will be running out of space on this repository. And then we get to the alert part. When it comes to monitoring your infrastructure for changes, you can set up alerts regarding changes in your immutability state, whether it's turned on or off, or you can also set alerts when the period itself has increased or decreased. Another useful alert is one that I was talking about a little bit earlier, the suspicious incremental backup size, which in some cases can indicate ransomware activity. But we also have a dedicated alert for possible ransomware activities. Now, please bear in mind that we are a backup solution. We're not a cybersecurity vendor. What we do is we give you some visibility into what is usually a result of ransomware, and that is increased CPU usage and increased disk usage. Please triage those alerts accordingly and make sure that you interpret them in a context. And this is how you do this part of monitoring and alerting, part 2. Now it's time to talk about part 3, and that is making sure that your backups are recoverable. And you can do that with data labs, specifically Sure Backup for VMware and Hyper-V, and Sure Replica for VMware. And you control these from the Veeam Backup and Replication console, from your backup infrastructure right here in Sure Backup. Both Sure Backup and Sure Replica are a type of technology that allows you to create an isolated environment within your infrastructure that does not affect your production environment. It practically creates an isolated network within a production host. Then Veeam is able to spin up virtual machines that you're looking to test directly from the backup files, so it doesn't need to migrate or transfer any backup files over the network. To add a virtual lab, you just click here, add a virtual lab, you pick the host, data store, proxy, you perform networking adjustments, and that's it. Basically, what you're doing here is you're giving Veeam visibility into where you have enough resources to execute some tests. Once Veeam spins up these virtual machines from the backup files, it will run 3 tests: heartbeat, ping, and application tests, because it's not enough to make sure that the machine can boot up and run. But in the case of a mission critical ones with dependencies, we also need to make sure that your applications are up and running. And if we're talking about application tests, let's go to the second part of defining a data lab, and that is adding an application group. You just hit add application group, hit next, and add the virtual machines that will be tested together. So for example, you've got an Exchange server that depends on Active Directory and on DNS. What we can do is test them all at once, making sure not only the machines themselves get up and running, but that they will also communicate with one another. And this is how you can add VMs to an application group. If you add them from a backup, you get to explore all your existing backup jobs. And for example, Exchange and Active Directory, you add them. And then you hit edit to specify the role that the machine has. Now, the role you specify is actually what application tests will be done. So for example, you have 2 roles for this one and 1 role for the other one. Aside from the application role that you can test, you can also define startup options. You can add multiple scripts to be tested, and this is where you define the credentials required. All right, so you've defined the virtual lab, you've added an application group. Now we schedule a sure backup job, and I will show you something really, really cool. Because for Windows machines, you can leverage your existing security solution to run an antivirus scan, and you will just need a simple XML file that will tell Veeam what the return codes for malicious files are and what the return codes for clean systems are. And we trigger a scan of the VM, and you decide what to do. So I hit add sure backup job. I chose VMware. I have the virtual lab here. I can see some information right here. What is my host? How many virtual machines are registered? How many running? What data store this host is connected to, and how much free space I have on it. Then I go ahead and choose an application group. And if I tick this box right here, keep the application group running after the job completes, I get an on-demand sandbox. I can use this to test patches, software updates, you name it, without impacting the machine in production. Because I can add tags for certain components in Veeam, I get this alert right here on my screen that tells me that there is a potential data sovereignty violation because my machines, my original machines are located in a part of Europe and I am trying to spin them up in another part of Europe. This link jobs here allows me to add more VMs to the Shore backup job or add VMs to the Shore backup job in case I do not want to define an application group. And now I have arrived at the settings part. I can tick this box to validate the entire virtual disk content for my backup files. And this is the malware scan I was telling you about that will leverage my existing antivirus. And then I can send a notification either through an SNMP trap or an email notification to a group of recipients or a distribution list. And then I can schedule the job right here. It can run daily, on certain days, monthly, or even after a specific job finishes running. And that's it. I hit apply and I start the Sure backup job. This is what a Sure backup job looks like. And let's take a quick look at our report to see what type of information is included in a report. You can opt to receive it via email, or you can just access it by going into the console and hitting report. You get information about the session, the tasks that were processed, and a few details. The VM name, heartbeat, ping, custom scripts, validation tests, and malware scan tests. You get information for successful runs of the Sure backup jobs and for errored runs of that backup jobs. In case of errors, you get details that tell you exactly what went on. All right, and that's about it. This is how you can increase your security posture when it comes to backups by leveraging immutability, both in your local data center through the hardened Linux repository and in the cloud for AWS S3 and S3 compatibles. You can leverage Veeam 1 to set up alerts and increase visibility over your infrastructure, and leverage Sure Backup to make sure that your backup files are clean and that your applications are 100% recoverable and all the dependencies are working normally. Now, I promised you folks that I will carve out some time at the end to answer questions and comments, and I will do just that. I am now opening the questions panel. So in the meantime, don't be shy and ask your questions. I received a very interesting question. Immutability is currently available for Linux and S3. Is there any roadmap to make it happen on other backup repositories also? The answer is yes. Uh, Actually, I'm not sure if you've heard just yet, but we have a launch event scheduled for Veeam Backup Our Application V12. It is scheduled for February 14th, and we are going to announce a bunch of changes on February 14th. And among those changes, we've got another repository that will support immutability, and that is Azure. Does using a store once device as a repository protect against ransomware? That is a very, very interesting question, Paul. Thank you for that. And I'm sure that we have something coming up in V12 that addresses this exact question and exact scenario, but let me just double check that so that I don't give you false information, and I will come back with an email to you. What AV products are supported for virus checks? Rule of thumb is that the AV product needs to support CLI, and that you need to have the return codes for clean and infected files in order to update the antivirus infos.xml file. So the real answer is we support multiple as long as the AV itself supports CLI. And of course, as long as you either get the codes by browsing the AV product documentation or by contacting the vendor support line. Is there a hands-on lab that you can test setting up Sure backups in prior to implementing in your production environment? Thank you for the question, Chris. I will get back to you on that because in some cases we do have some regional events that imply hands-on labs. All right. Hassan is telling us that they have an all-in-one setup using a UCSS 3260 server and the OS is Windows. Is there any way to make the Windows repository immutable? And if not, is there some guidelines to move to, for example, a Linux repository? First part of the question, no, we do not offer immutability for Windows repositories. And second part, yes, we have extended documentation on how to set up a Linux hardened repository. I will send it to you after this webinar. I saw you monitoring VMware vCenter with Veeam, but what about SCVMM? Is this scenario also possible or just Hyper-V hosts? Veeam also supports SCVMM, not only Hyper-V hosts. How do you make existing backups immutable? That's a very interesting question. Let me get back to you on that, although I'm sure that the immutability option won't be applied retroactively. But let me dive a little bit deeper into that question. Can we make Windows servers backup immutable? If you're referring to the backup files of Windows servers, then yes. If you're asking about Windows repositories, then no, we don't offer immutability for Windows repositories. Yes, absolutely, Catalin. I will send you the documentation for hardening repository, for the Linux hardened repository. All right, so I think I got all of the questions. If you did not hear an answer, I will make sure to double check them after the webinar, and I will make sure you get your answers. Okay, great. I will send you Rasmus and Andrew, I will send you the documentation to implement a Linux hardened repo. Are there any other questions, comments, complaints? Okay, I don't see any more questions coming in. So I will give back 3 minutes to your day, which I realize is not a lot. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you very much for your time, and have a beautiful Monday ahead. I'll see you next time.